everybody, this is Solar Tiger with another video, and this video will be about heated gloves, because when I'm waiting for the bus in cold weather, or now that I have bought my e-bike, I'm riding my e-bike, then I need to have some gloves. Especially when I'm riding the e-bike along the road, even at 15 miles an hour, there is cold wind blowing against you, and this will make your hands very cold, and when that happens you'll find it hard to grip the handlebars, and when your hands get cold it makes it hard to operate the controls, such as the brakes and the gears and other essential controls. And if you have cold hands and you can't use them very well, then this could be a safety concern in case I need to suddenly brake to avoid something, and if my hands are very cold I might not be able to do that. So safety thing, and also cold hands are just not very comfortable and they can get painful, and generally that's just not good. So on the market there are a range of heated gloves, from the very cheap to the quite expensive, and I will show you some that I have here, and I'll explain some things about them. So to start off with, we'll start with the cheapest ones. That's these battery heated gloves. Now these are cheap ones. You'll find these in the gadgety type section of department stores that sell clothing and other things. So these are sort of gift type thing that they might have along with other things. So these are battery heated gloves. They sort of do a one size fits all type of thing, and I tried these on and they were too big. I put them on as far as I could get them on, and I had about ½ inch of dead space at the end of the fingers, so that wasn't very good for me. Also, they run on AA batteries. They go in this battery box type thing that goes into this pocket in here, and there's only one temperature. There's an on-off switch on the bottom there, and they recommend that you use alkaline batteries, and I guess I'd say you get maybe 1 or 2 hours out of them on a new set of batteries. And I will say here that alkaline batteries are fairly expensive at the moment, so they probably won't last long, and probably just operating on the 3 AA batteries, they probably don't produce a lot of heat, so they're more of a sort of a fad rather than anything practical. You put this box inside the cuff of the gloves. I can't really do this. That goes into there, goes in the cuff, and then that's like that. I'd probably say that when you're wearing them, this part is very bulky on your wrists, say. So they're probably not the most comfortable things either, but they're cheap. So that's those. I probably wouldn't recommend those, so we'll get rid of those. On the subject of battery heated gloves, then if you want to pay more money, then you could get some rechargeable heated gloves. These are from Venture Heat, and These ones operate on 7.4 volts with a rechargeable battery, lithium ion battery, a 7.4 volts 2.2 amp hour battery that has a built-in temperature controller. Try and show you this. It has 4 settings, and you change the setting with this button here. These gloves are pretty well made. They're well insulated and they're waterproof, and you'll get several hours out of the battery. So that's those. They're more better quality, and the battery is a lot smaller, and that's those ones. If you're riding on a bike, e-bike, or I say on an e-bike, or you could use these on a moped, you could say. The only thing I'd say is that if you're riding on a moped, they can go fairly fast, so you would be probably recommended to wear armoured gloves if you're riding on a moped. In case you fell off, then it would protect the back of your hand and your knuckles. But as I'm riding on a e-bike, or if you're riding on a bicycle that's fairly low speed, then that's probably not critical, though it wouldn't hurt in case you fell off for any reason. So it's also adjustable. There's an adjustment here. You can cinch it around your wrist, and there's an adjustment on the cuff here as well. So that's that. So that's the Venture Heat rechargeable gloves. So with the rechargeable gloves, that means you're not attached to the bike in any way, and also if you're riding on a bicycle or an e-bike, you don't have a 12-volt battery that you can connect to. The battery that powers your bike is probably 24 volts, 36 volts, or 48 volts or more, and you can't easily connect that to your gloves. And also you can wear these away from the bike, so if you get off the bike, then you're not attached to it. So that's one thing. The downside of that is, of course, you're limited to how long they work by the capacity of the battery, but you probably get a few hours out of one battery. So unless you were cycling a really long way, it probably would last out for you. So that's those. Then if I pop those away, I might come back to them later. And then after that we move on to 12-volt gloves. Now these are typically used on mopeds and motorbikes, and for people that ride long distance. And the advantage here is you can connect to the battery on your bike, and since it's being charged by the engine, the battery doesn't go flat, and as long as you're running the engine, you can have endless amounts of heat, and more of it as well, as you can have more power from your motorcycle battery than you can from a rechargeable battery pack. But on an e-bike, as I said, you don't have an easily accessible 12-volt battery. As I said, most of them work on 24, 36 or 48 volts, so that's not going to work. So what you can do, you have two options, but I'll come to that in a minute. So I have two lots of motorcycle heated gloves. I have a set from Jerving here on the left, and a pair from Clan on the right, and these are 12-volt gloves. Connect to this connector here, and this connector here. That connects to your bike. So these ones do not have a temperature controller built in, but you can buy gloves that do. They have a button on here or in the back of the glove somewhere that allows you to alter the temperature, but these ones don't, so this means you need a temperature controller, otherwise they will operate at maximum heat all the time. And in the case of these gloves, they operate at about 30 watts maximum, and that's quite hot, so you'll probably want a controller to tone it down. So these gloves are waterproof. They have a waterproof liner inside so that the rain won't soak through them. So these are made of a Cordura type material with leather reinforcements, as you can see. These Jerving ones are leather. They are actually leather gloves. These Jerving's ones. And again, they're adjustable around there, and in the cuff, adjustable. Jerving's ones cost me about £70. It came with a temperature controller and a battery hookup. And these Clan ones, I paid £20 for these and a whole box of other heated gear for £20. So now to run these, you have two choices. You either use this temperature controller wiring harness that has these cables. There's a pair of cables that you run down each of your sleeves, and then you plug a glove into each end. On this end you connect the hookup cable that looks like this. There's a socket for that to plug into, and this end attaches to your motorcycle battery, however you want to do it, and it has a fuse in it. Fuse is important. In case anything goes wrong in your gear, it blows the fuse, or if anything goes wrong in your charging system of your bike, it will also blow the fuse. So that's how that works. You can either hook up to your motorbike battery, or you can hook up the cable to a battery pack, like this Jerving's one. It's a 9 amp hour battery pack. It has a built-in temperature controller and a remote key fob, and you can either use the built-in temperature controller or you can disable it, just use it as a battery. So if you have this temperature controller, I can disable the one in the battery pack, so that will power it that way. I have another controller over here that comes with a remote. I'll come back to that. Or you can plug the gloves themselves directly into a motorcycle jacket. This is a heated motorcycle jacket. This is a Kais J501, and this has the wiring for the gloves in the sleeves. So you take the cable coming out of the sleeve and you connect it directly to the glove. It plugs in there, then it's powered from your jacket, and then your jacket has a power supply cable that's here, and that will go through a temperature controller, say like that, and then the power supply side goes to the wiring on your motorbike or to the battery pack. So that just saves a bit of wiring, and that's how that works. So that's how you can power it, even on a e-bike or a standard bike that obviously has no battery on it. And obviously the 12 volt stuff puts out more heat than the 7.4 volt stuff, and the USB stuff that's available as well. I don't really recommend the USB stuff because it lacks any heating power really, and the power banks you need to run them are fairly bulky as well. So that's how this goes. So if you have a jacket, heated jacket, and you have the gloves, then if you only have one temperature controller, you can connect them together, and then the gloves and the jacket will have the same temperature, although that's not always ideal. You might want the jacket hotter, you might want the gloves hotter or colder. So it'd be better to have a dual controller so you can control them separately. Otherwise your hands might be over hot and your body's not hot enough, or your body's too hot and your gloves are the wrong temperature. So you probably want to adjust them separately, so you'll need a dual controller. So that's that. Then we come to another thing with the gloves. Now on your, I'll refer to your e-bike, bike or motorcycle, the same kind of things apply. When you're wearing gloves, then depending on how bulky they are, you might find it difficult to operate some of the controls. Obviously, operating the brake lever, for example, is pretty easy no matter what type of gloves you wear, as it's easy to grab hold of, they're quite easy to hold. The thing comes when you're trying to operate more fiddly controls, such as maybe you want to change the level of power assistance when you're riding on your bike. That's usually some push button on the control panel, and with your fingers that's easy to press the button. But if you're wearing bulky gloves, then trying to push a button with these gloves can sometimes be awkward. You might end up pressing more than one button and you'll find that awkward. So that's something to bear in mind as well. Obviously the thicker and bulkier the gloves, maybe the warmer they are, but then it makes it harder to operate fiddly controls. So that's something to bear in mind. Whether you're riding a moped, an e-bike or a motorbike, some of the controls might have fiddly buttons that are quite small, and that might be hard to press. So that's something to bear in mind. And on the same kind of note, that if you want to change the temperature whilst wearing the gloves, then you might find that, say, trying to push this button here, it's easy enough with your finger, but if you're trying to push it wearing these thick gloves, for example, that might be harder to do. So that's something if you're trying to press small buttons. That might be easier if your controller has just a big button on it, so like this. It's hard to show here, trying to push a button. Or maybe you might think that actually just twisting a control knob might be easier wearing gloves. So that's trying to operate the controls. The other problem I would say is that when you have a temperature controller, it depends where you put it as well. Because let's say that if you're using this temperature controller and it's in your wiring, if it's under your coat or jacket or something, then trying to get to it wearing gloves might be hard. So that's something to bear in mind. Whereas if you have this control stuck on your handlebars, say, on a bracket on your handlebars, it's obviously easy to reach all the time. It's not under your clothing or something, so having a remote for your controller would be a good idea. This one's probably easier to operate than trying to push, say, these buttons that are on a key fob with big bulky gloves. Pressing these is probably impossible as well. And if you put this in your pocket, trying to get them out of your pocket wearing gloves is nigh on impossible. Don't say how I know that, because if you think, oh, I'll just pick a level before I set off, undoubtedly at some point you'll probably want to change it. Same with your jacket. Probably when you set off, you're cold, you haven't warmed up, you want a higher setting. Then after, say, I don't know, a couple of miles down the road, when your jacket's heated up to temperature, you might want to alter the setting. Probably you want to turn it down after a while once it's heated up. And if you're riding along the open road, you probably want a higher setting. And then when you come to the town and you start hitting the traffic lights, or both the permanent ones or the temporary ones where they're digging up the road, and while you're waiting in the traffic, while you're waiting, you're not moving, there's no cold air blowing over you, then you'll probably start overheating, and at that point you'll want to turn the setting down. So you'll want a temperature controller that's easy to hand. Again, don't ask me how I know this, as I've set the temperature, well, I've been riding using the battery pack and the key fob. I'll set the temperature with the key fob, stick the key fob in my pocket, start riding off down the road. Only, say, a mile or two down the road, I get stuck at the traffic lights, and while I'm waiting at the traffic lights, I start being grilled by my heated clothing because there's no cooling air blowing over me. So yeah, you want to be able to easily change the temperature in an easy manner that doesn't involve you taking off your eyes off the road for any length of time. If you have a controller right in front of you, it's easy to turn the knob while you're still riding. But if you have to try and find it underneath your clothes or try and dig it out of your pocket, obviously you can't do that whilst riding. You'll have to pull over somewhere to do that, and it's very hard when you're wearing thick gloves to operate fiddly controls. So I would recommend having a setup where you have dual controls, one for your heated clothing and one for your gloves. Have a controller that has a remote, so something like this with a remote, but a dual one. Now this is made by I think this is made by a UK company or an American company, and these things hardly ever come up on eBay. And the only other one I've seen is made by Jerbing, a similar kind of thing, but it's a bit bulkier than this. But I'm looking for a dual controller. I want something like this, with a controller like this, but a dual one that I can plonk on the handlebars of my e-bike to make changing the temperature easier. So that's what I'm going to recommend. The only other alternative is to buy battery heated gloves like these Venture Heat ones. Though they do make cycling type ones that are less bulky, have thinner fingers. So you go with those, and some kind of battery heated jacket. I have some of those as well. So that would eliminate all the wiring as well. But what you get depends on your particular circumstances. Heated gear can be expensive, but I say it's well worth the money. There's nothing worse than being cold on your bike, your e-bike or your motorbike. More so if you have a moped or motorbike, since it goes faster and the wind is much colder. So this is Solar Tiger with a video about heated gloves, different types and how to hook them up. I hope you found this interesting. If you do, please like and leave a comment down below. And until next time, this is Solar Tiger saying thank you for watching. Thank you.